Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gabe's here. This is the raid guide for Heroic and Normal Oregorger. And this is generally going to be one of the easier bosses in the zone, but he's definitely a step above stuff like Rule or Beastlord Darmak, stuff like that, so just plan accordingly. Mostly this encounter is in two phases. You have the standard phase, where your raid is generally stacked up pretty tightly, handling his basic mechanics, and then once he runs out of hunger or mana, he will then go on a rampage, rolling around the room, trying to collect ore to eat up and satiate his hunger. So let's get started. So just like most normal and heroic fights, you don't really have to think about raid composition too much. However, this is one of those interesting situations where the more ranged players you have, more ranged DPS, the more healing that your raid will have to output. The things that hit the ranged players hit all of them equally, and it's not like it splits the damage or anything. So the more people that you can afford to have in melee range, more melee DPS, the less healing you'll have to do. Again, you're probably not going to want to actually change your raid composition for that. It won't matter that much, but it's just an interesting little difference in this fight compared to most of them. Now, when you begin the encounter, you will start off in the standard phase. This is where you're just fighting Oregorger straight up like you normally would any other boss. This is where you will spend most of your time, and it will require the majority of your healing and cooldowns and all that good stuff. All right, so the positioning for standard phase is pretty simple. You got Oregorger, the boss. You have melee DPS that are roughly split evenly, and we'll talk about why in a second. So one group of melee in the back left, one in the back right, respectively. You also have your two tanks. One's going to be in front of the boss, right up in his business. The other tank is going to be behind that first tank. And again, we'll talk about why that is in a second. And you also have all your ranged DPS and healers that start off at maximum range, kind of to one side of the hallway or the other. And you have to imagine that there's actually a hall that we're all in. So running on either side, there's walls here. So from these basic positions, then you can actually get into the management of the first phase. So the first thing that you'll have to worry about in the standard phase is Retched Blackrock. And so I've just reduced every ranged and healer just to this one icon to make it easier. So this healer here represents everybody that's stacked up in range. So the basic idea is when the boss starts to cast Retched Blackrock, he will target a random raid member, and it's a ranged player. However, he chooses the position of that player at the start of the cast, not at the end of it. So what that means is as soon as the cast starts, all the ranged players need to move to the next position. So if you're starting in the back right, you will immediately move left. And if you're against the wall, the edge of the crap will give you room, essentially. So you can move to the left and be safe here. And the puddle from Retched Blackrock will exist where you started off. And then it's cast a second time, and now you'll move forward along the left wall. And again, the new Blackrock will come out, and oops, that's a little big, but whatever. You get the idea. And then from this position here, then you'll wait for the next cast, third cast, then you'll move right. Again, getting another bubble, and so on. And this process keeps repeating, the range group moving forward closer and closer to the boss tank position. But if you started at the very back side at maximum range, so 40 yards from the boss, with everyone stacked up, you will have enough room before the phase ends, and you won't get too close to the boss. So that's the basic management of Retched Blackrock. The other big mechanic and why the positions are set up this way is the Acid Torrent. And this is cast on a random ranged raid member once again. So that's another reason that everyone is stacked up in the one position here. And when it targets that player, it will hit the first player in line. So the first person that it can actually touch the projectile, which will be this front tank. And that's why the tanks are in front of one another. And the interesting thing about the Acid Torrent is that its initial hit is very severe. So the tank will take severe damage and choose a cooldown, but then distributes a portion of that damage after the mitigation, so after the cooldowns affect it, to everyone in a cone behind. So it will hit the tank behind, as well as all the ranged DPS, ranged DPS and healers back there. So, for this reason, as long as your tank in front uses a cooldown, or you have a cooldown to provide to them, the damage that everyone else takes will be reduced significantly. It also applies a stacking debuff on the tanks. It's important that your tanks swap when the stack gets to 2, essentially. So every 2 stacks, you swap out. The final positional mechanic is for melee, and that's why you have 2 melee camps, one in the back left and one in the back right. And this is Explosive Shard. It will target a random melee player, melee DPS, and throw a little shard at the ground in that location. And anybody that's in a short radius around it will get knocked back, take a little bit of damage, but more importantly, after a few seconds, the shard will explode, doing significantly more damage to anyone that's still there. So, the reason for 2 camps is that if a shard hits the back left position, for example, you can then have your melee that are there. I can't really move it. There we go. Move to the other side. So now your explosion that's in the back left, that's about to go off, is not going to hit anybody because all the melee that were there moved to the other position temporarily. And then once that explosion goes away, then the melee can move back to their original spot. So that's the basic idea for Shard. It's a pretty simple mechanic. Now, if you just have one melee camp, you can do this as well. It just means that the overall damage dealt to the raid will be slightly higher because everyone will be hit by the initial Shard cast. But from there, it's simple in that everyone would move over to the other position to avoid the explosion. But I'd recommend splitting it. It's not too complicated. It's the major thing that melee have to watch for. The final standard phase mechanic is Blackrock Barrage. And this is an ability that needs to be interrupted. If he successfully casts it, it will deal moderate damage to the entire raid. And it's just some forms of damage you can't really afford to take. And the interrupt mechanic is kind of interesting as well. Oregorger will gain a buff called Blackrock Spines. And this has a 3-stack count at the beginning. And each time he attempts to cast Blackrock Barrage after gaining the buff, it will reduce his stack count. And when he has no stacks left, he won't cast it anymore until a significant time later when he gains a new 3-stack and the process repeats. For that reason, you need 3 sources of interrupts to handle this 100% efficiently, to interrupt all of them. However, just because of the speed of it and the number of other casts that might confuse your interrupters, I would suggest you use a backup system. So we chose to use 3 pairs of 2 players each, assigned to various interrupt counts. So one pair gets the first interrupt, second pair gets the second, third gets the third, and so on. And by doing this, even if one of the 2 people screws up, the other one is there to back them up and get that particular interrupt. And the other important reason, other than the incoming damage for interrupting this ability, is it costs Oregorger mana to cast every ability he uses in this main phase. And therefore, if he's successfully allowed to cast Barrage, he will spend 5 more mana than he would normally, ending this standard phase that much faster. So if you interrupt every Barrage that he casts, you extend the first phase to the maximum possible length, which means more DPS time, and you finish the fight faster. Now, once Oregorger uses up all of his mana in the standard phase, he will become hungry and begin the roll phase. And this is probably the most fun, most interesting phase, but it can also be the most difficult until your raid members get some practice and kind of get used to the patterns that are possible. So the first thing to think about for the roll phase is the layout of the room. So if you think of the room in the top-down position, what you'll actually find is that the entire room is a 7x7 grid. So I have overlaid the minimap to show you the actual grid squares. So you can see there's 1 top left, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so the gray squares that I have, gray-blue squares, these show the hard walls that exist. So the outside edges are hard walls, of course, as well. But for the most part, all you need to think about are the inner ones or these corner ones. And these prevent not only players from passing through them, but also Oregorger himself. Now from there, the critical points are actually the central 4 rectangles. So those positions are touching his 8 stopping points that Oregorger can use throughout the roll phase. So there are a few basic rules to keep in mind to understand how Oregorger moves around during this phase, and this will help you get a grasp on the phase as a whole. So the first rule is that Oregorger always stops when he runs into an inside wall, or essentially when he hits one of these 8 inner squares, excluding this central 9th one. So this will be marked by these 8 red positions. These are his 8 red stopping points. So he can only stop at one of those 8 positions throughout the phase. He can never move backwards. So let's mark his position here just as an example. So say he's this orange position. So if he's here, he will always be facing this square because it's the one of these 8 central ones that he's touching. So he'll always be facing that. And from there, he can therefore only move to the left or to the right. He cannot go backwards. So he can't go this way because that's to his back. But he can look to the left to indicate he's going this way, or he can look to the right to indicate he's going this way. The next rule is that he will always take a straight path if he's going one of the inner pathways. So if he's here and he goes left, he looks left, he's going in an inner pathway, and he's going to go straight because he will hit one of these inner 8 squares. It'll be this one here. So for example, let's just simulate. He moves, he's going left, and boom, he hits this wall, and he'll stop here. And that's his next position. From there, he'll decide another direction and so on. On the other hand, if he chooses to go on an outside path, so meaning he's going to hit the outer wall, he can curve around, and he will always curve to the left or counterclockwise. So if he's in this position, he chooses to go left, he's going to go straight, but he's going to then potentially hit this outer wall. But because he cannot do that, he will curve. And again, he will curve around this outer wall, and then he will end up here. So let's just show you what it's doing. So here he's going to hit an outer wall. So he turns left, another outer wall, he turns left again. But boom, he hits this inner wall, and he stops. And then finally, he prefers to pick up or gather ore if it is available on the ground in his immediate pathway. So if he's in this bottom left position here, and there is some ore available. So let's put some ore there, this blue marker on the left side. And then we'll put another one, say, over here. So there's 2 ore active, and he's in a stop position. If he just arrived here, so he's yet to decide a direction to go, he will prefer to go towards ore if it is available along a next available path. So if he can choose to get ore by going left this way, or by going right, he will prefer to go the way that ore is available. So if there was ore already on the ground and he got to this position, he will always go left because there's ore in this path that he would go next. Now, just to give a better example, if there isn't ore in that path, say it's top and to the right still. So now he doesn't have any preferential direction because there is not ore in this left path, nor is there ore in this right path. So he will just randomly choose left or right. So you can use that knowledge to your advantage in some situations by placing ore in positions that you want him to go to next. So now let's finally talk about how you actually stay safe in this phase, essentially, some best practices, and also how this allows you to clear out some of the ore to actually end the phase. So the first thing is that your raid's going to want to start along one of the outside halls here, outside walls. You'll see in the video that we do this. So for this example, we'll just assume that we're in the outside wall here at the bottom. So what this means is that Oregorger is going to be tanked in the orange square in the bottom there. And when the phase begins, when the roll phase begins, you will always move to the nearest starting location before he starts rolling. So from here, he's going to move to this position, and that's where he'll start his standard roll phase, choosing left or right and going around. So the initial safe point for your raid, and I'm just going to refer to that spot as you, because people will be running around on their own, of course. So you are this green position, and this is a pretty safe position outright, because there are only two paths to get here. It's from this marker. If he chooses to go right, he will get here. And from this position, if he chooses to go left, he will get here. So from his initial spot, he can choose to go right or left. There's no ore available at this point, so it's just pretty much a toss-up. So if he chooses to go right, go around here. Let's simulate that. Well, now you just stay where you are, because there's really no benefit for you moving. The reason that you don't really want to move is that if you move forward a little bit, you could be threatened in one move. So if he chooses to go left from there and go down to this spot, well, now you're threatened. You know, it's like a chess game or something. You're threatened in one move. He's checkmating you if you move forward. But if you stay here, you're safe. He cannot get to you without doing two moves, essentially. And they have to be the right moves. So from this position, let's say he moves left, comes down here. And again, he will choose left or right. And it will be random because there's not going to be any ore available unless somehow there was range able to shoot some ore box over here. But let's just assume that he goes right. Or he actually is looking to the right. So this is now where you start to be threatened, because you know that once he moves here, you can be killed in the next move. So as soon as he's here and he looks to the right, then you want to start moving. And what you actually want to do is follow him, because you know that he cannot move backwards. So he's going to look to the right and start moving that way like this, and you are going to follow him and stay behind him. Now, from here, what you do depends what he does, of course. So he may look to the left. It's pretty likely, because you probably started the phase killing some ore crates that were right here in your original hallway. And so he'll want to pick those up. So he'll probably go left and go around here. And if he does that, your safety position is actually moving forward and essentially mirroring what you did over here in this spot. So let's just assume that he does that. He's going to go left. He goes around here. And as he's doing that, so as soon as he starts to face left, or as soon as he starts moving rather, you are going to move 2 squares away and get in this sort of between cubby, just like you were over here. It's just the equivalent in this spot. So from here, then the process essentially repeats. You wait in your spot until it is safe to move out, or until you're forced to do so. So if he goes left down here, you don't want to move yet unless he faces to the right, and then you repeat the process. So let's just say he goes down here. Now, if he's looking to the right, you can move up behind him and just do the same thing you did before. But if he looks to the left from here, then you know that you just want to stay here, because he'll go around. And again, if you move out, you are threatened in one move. Now, what you can do is, if you need to kill ore, say you're, let's just, duplicate these positions, but in a different area of the room. So say you've managed to follow him around, you're moved over here, but there's ore at the top that you want to kill. If he looks to be, oops, actually I didn't move the right spot. You're actually here. Now, if he looks to be going to the right from here, so he's going to go around this way, it's tempting to follow him and kill these ore crates. The problem is that if he goes left on this next move, you're probably screwed. You have to be very quick. You can do it, but you need some form of movement boost or just really quick reaction, because this is only one, 2 moves to loop back around and kill you. On the other hand, if he goes from here to the right and then he looks to the right, then that's your safety clear. That's when you really want to move forward and kill off these crates, because you know this is completely safe from his position opposite side for a number of moves. So those are the kind of basic concepts that you need to keep in mind. You can follow him, but make sure you don't follow him in such a way that you will be threatened in 2 moves. If you are going to be threatened, you can stay where you are because you are always retaining a safety gap like that. So the final thing to keep in mind about the roll phase is that every time he slams into a wall, he will deal some raid damage. And over time, this damage increases. So it's sort of a soft enrage of the phase itself. When you go to a second roll phase, he will reset his damage. So you can do multiples, you just can't do the same one infinitely. To end it, of course, you have to have him eat the ore, and the boxes are spawned around the room. You can see them glowing very brightly. Unfortunately, I haven't experienced this fight enough. You can even see our kills very sloppy. I haven't experienced the fight enough to actually see if the ore positions are static. If they are, you can probably plan around that accordingly. So I'm sure in Mythic, the guide for Mythic on this fight will have much more information and sort of actual hard patterns that you can do to force him to go in different ways and whatnot, based on which ores you kill. But for now, unfortunately, I don't have any of that, just because we didn't have enough experience or time spent on him to have to figure it out. But I think that covers everything. It's a fun fight, some cool mechanics for sure, new stuff you haven't really seen before, and that should do it for the raid guide for Normal and Heroic Oregorger. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. You know, one very easy way to roll yourself right into my heart is to hit that subscribe button. My heart goes pitter-patter with the thoughts. And I wouldn't eat all your ore, I swear. Well, maybe some of it.